Hi, my name is Dr. Fred Sylvester, and welcome to this episode of Health Talk. Today we're going to talk about some nutrition, and nutrition is one of my passions. Personally, when you're looking at nutrition, I believe that when you're starting to look at what you put in your body, ultimately is what you become. So we're going to talk about green drinks today, and green drinks are an amazing component of how we can, I'll say, add healthfulness to our own healthful being. So the first thing we have to start to understand is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is an interesting and often overlooked process and phenomenon that occurs every day. So what we see in photosynthesis is you have green leaves that are going to absorb carbon dioxide, but they're also going to take a unit of energy from the sun, which is called a photon, and it's going to start to convert that into an energy called glucose, and then it's going to give us oxygen. This is extremely vital and necessary for as life we know it today. So as we're looking at how things start to kind of manifest themselves from green drinks and what we consume and what we eat at this point, it becomes very important to understand a little bit of physics. Physics, in the essence of light, is measured in a photon. And a photon is just really what they call a quantum of light. A quantum of light is going to be the unit of energy that light is measured in. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but what is fascinating is that each of our cells in our human body emit a small amount of light. And this is called an ultra-weak photon emission. We find this in our tissues, in our cells, and what is so fascinating about this is this is being studied since 1920 in Germany and in Poland, and now currently in the United States. And what they're finding is that they're finding that the photon of light is like a superhighway of communication. So I find it fascinating when you start thinking about, like, when we have a ankle injury, okay? How does it instantaneously go from your ankle that gets injured, the hoist back up to your brain, the hoist back to your ankle to interpret into a situation of pain, just like that, in an instant at this point? Many researchers believe that that communication is happening at the speed of light. And the speed of light is what we are measuring now, is what we're contemplating, is called these photons. So as our cells emit lights, we look at this as a way that things can communicate within our bodies. And when these things communicate like that, that starts to give us an idea that there is something on another dimension, such as, when we look at our gravitational field, our electromagnetic fields, when we look at our small nuclear fields, weak and strong at this point, this field of light energy kind of sits in that whole realm. So with that being taken into consideration, we start to understand what we consume is what we become. So green drinks, these are kind of things that have been on the radar probably for the last 20 years, and there's a reason that we should be considering to consume them. In a green drink, as you can see, they're loaded with chlorophyll, they're loaded with chlorella, they're loaded with spirulina. These are all different mechanisms and different plants that contain a lot of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is what gives pigments in our leaves, anything that's going to turn everything green. So I kind of picked up a couple little leaves as we were coming in today, and you look at these leaves, originally they were green, right, at this point, and now all of a sudden they have turned into a different brown or a red and that type of stuff. And the reason that they have done this is because as the light intensity has decreased, our days have gotten shorter, chlorophyll, which would turn this thing green, becomes less and less. So as chlorophyll becomes less and less, they start to turn into their reds and their yellows and those types of things as these seasons unfold and fall goes out. But chlorophyll is the driving force of what creates photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is what we said before, it creates oxygen, absorbs CO2, and then ultimately creates glucose, which is food. So as we consume grasses and we consume things that have a green component to it, spirulina, which is seaweed, you look at inulin, you look at broccoli, you look at kale, green tea. What do these things do? They start to create an atmosphere inside our body that starts to promote healing and health. So when our cells are starting to undergo division, cell replication in the DNA world, and when they're producing energy, which is through the mitochondria, we know that these two systems and these two processes are where most of the light emission is happening. And when that occurs, that means that we not only are healthy, but we also have more energy. So DNA creates our healthfulness, and our mitochondria creates our energy. So as we add green drinks and green leaves and green grasses to our diets and that type of thing, we start to add and assist into the concept of that light energy being transferred, or that communicative world, and highways starting to continue to move forward. When we consume green drinks, we start to think about how it increases cell health. It also increases hydration. When we have a cell that's more hydrated, we have a cell that's more healthy. 70% of our body is made up of water. So by adding that type of ingredient to our life, it makes us more healthy. Green drinks also act as free radicals. This is where you see green tea. This is where you see, we'll say, spinach and kale. What they do is they help neutralize free radicals. And free radicals are things that create injuries to our cells, so they act as a buffer. Green drinks also increase our pH, or balance our pH, and make us more alkaline. We've known since probably 1940 that when we have disease processes that sit into our body, those disease processes usually set off a more acidic environment within our body, which makes us more sick. Alkalinity, though, on the other hand, promotes more and more healthfulness at this point. And green drinks, which are loaded with calcium, help buffer those pHs, which help keep us more on that concept of looking at more of an alkalinity or healthfulness at this point. But what we really want to start to understand here is not photosynthesis and not spirulina and all those types of things. What we really want to start to understand is when you consume something that has a green tone to it, then what ultimately happens to us is that we consume that. And I have often told many patients that we're only as healthy as the line of cells that are in our body right now. So as our cells continue to age and they start to move more towards a death per se, believe it or not, which makes sense, that light that we were measuring, which is 1,000 times weaker than we can ever see by the human eye, you have to use special equipment to actually create the bioluminescence to start to see these cells emit light. The light themselves, as we age, becomes less and less. As we start to think about supporting those types of things with the things we consume, the better and bolder that light continues to become. So when we start to think about farm-raised, and when we start to think about things that are wild-caught or cattle that is grass-fed, this becomes important because whatever those animals or fish are consuming at this point ultimately will be consumed. We will be the ultimate consumer. And so whatever makes up their proteins and whatever makes up their tissues at this point ultimately comes into us. So when we think about a wild-caught salmon versus a farm-raised salmon at this point, one is going to be eating something that has more of a green, wild component to it. As the smaller fish eat the green algae and those types of things and spirulina, the bigger fish come in and eat them, and they get absorbed into it, and then ultimately it comes down to us as we consume that. So as those little fish are consuming the plants, other fish are consuming them, we ultimately consume them. That's what we become part of. So that starts to increase our component of our photons and our lightness as we're looking at. When we look at farm-raised, they are usually pellet-fed, and when they are pellet-fed, that's more corn-based. And being more corn-based, that's when you start to run into a concept that the fish or the protein in sources are a little bit different. Wild-caught being better than farm-raised. Both have some benefits to it, but if you had to pick between the two, that's what you're looking at. Same thing goes on with our chickens and our cows. Things that are more free-range and grass-fed and that type of stuff have a better mix of their physiology and their muscles and their cells. So when we consume those types of things, we get the benefit of them, okay? When you eat more pellet-raised type of things or things out of a can, that's where you start to run into a challenge of unhealthfulness at this point. And it's not unhealthy, it's just that we can do a better job in supporting them. So I've been consuming a green drink, I'm going to say probably since 2001. It's been this one here. It's called Metagreens, and Metagreens has a couple different things in it, but it's really based off of spirulina, which is seaweed, inulin, which is a prebiotic, which helps increase the whole kind of digestive. This has broccoli, this has alfalfa in it, wheatgrass. All these things that you start to see out there all promote the concept of detoxifying and creating a better pH balance. And the more that you can create a pH balance into you, the healthier you become. Like I said, we're only as healthy as our cells, and if we feed and nourish our bodies in that environment, then ultimately what happens is we become a healthful component and a projection of what our cells are doing. When we think of diabetes and that type of stuff, diabetes is not just a concept of where you have a poor pancreas. It's just that line of cells that has been generated is performing less optimally and has a poor function to it. So by doing some of these types of things to add in and assist into our world, we can get a more healthier lifestyle just by some of the stuff that we consume. So green drinks are going to be connected to light. Light is going to be connected to our sun. All these things have energy, and all these things promote health. Good day and good health.